What's up, everybody? How's it hanging? How's it happening? Because you guys know this is Kevin from the Chord Progression Podcast. Hey, everybody, it is the last day of March. It is March 31st of 2022, and at the beginning of the month, we talked to the band Afton, and we talked about their song, Cool Girl, and how it brought up so many different issues that women are facing in the music industry today. And we talked about some of those issues and talked about potentially how to, start to fix some of those issues. Following that episode, someone reached out to me about being on the podcast, and I looked at what she had going on, and I'm like, you know what? Let's make it happen. And this episode is as enlightening as it gets. I absolutely love doing this episode. But before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors first, Phoenix Fitness. You guys know I love going to concerts. I went to like 8 this month. I'm going to 9 next month. And I'm one of those people that, you put me in a mosh pit, I cannot get out of it. I see a mosh pit, I'm like, ooh, let's go. Yeah, that's kind of like me. But in order to make sure I can do this all the time, because it's, I'm always in the gym, always working out, lifting, cardio, literally everything I need to achieve my fitness goals of being the strongest, the most fit that I can possibly be, along with making sure that when I go to those mosh pits, I will not jump out of there for any reason that pertaining to, my physical well-being. So in order to make sure that gets done, I go to the gym, work out all the time, but I need to prepare and recover right so that my body's prepared to do it again the next day and achieve those fitness goals. So that's where Phoenix Fitness comes in. They help you achieve those fitness goals in many different ways. They have different pre-workouts for you to help, get that workout going, get that pump going, both stim and stim-free blends. I use the stim-free stuff because even though like the past 4 days, I have gotten like 4 hours of sleep each night, I still don't need all that caffeine, man. I'm still wired enough as it is, and it's pretty obvious at this point. They also have different, BCAA recovery compounds, which help you absorb the nutrients for your muscles following your workout. Different creatines, different protein ones, AM, PM, after your workout, collagen protein, plant-based protein to help you rebuild muscle. There are multivitamins and literally anything you need to help achieve your fitness goals, Phoenix Fitness has for you. So our listeners get 15% off using the code MSOTD at fxfit.com. Link to the podcast. Thank you, Phoenix Fitness. Our second sponsor is Custom Debuts. You want to be the coolest cat in the office, in your dorm room, in the garage, in your man cave, in your room, honestly, wherever you want to put a cool poster that no one else is going to have and feel like you're the shit, that's where Custom Debuts comes in. So here's what they do. They will put together a custom poster for you with anything in music. So you give them an artist, say it's Ice Nine Kills. They'll give them an album, say it's The Silver Scream, or give them a song, say it's A Great Mistake. And they'll create a custom poster based off that information for you that no one else is going to have. They'll do something with the album artwork, the lyrics of the song, everything. So if you like it, they'll send you approved in 48 hours and you approve it or not. If you don't approve it, tell them what you want done differently and they'll do it differently. And once you approve, you can have it sent to you on normal poster paper, canvas print, or as an aluminum sign. Okay, who doesn't want an aluminum sign of Ice Nine Kills? That'd be freaking awesome. So go and do that. Our listeners get 10% off. It's code CPP10 at Cubs Debuts website. Link to the podcast and Cubs Debuts. Now to our future presentation. So today's guest is Anastasia Canfield. She also goes by Anastasia Rose, that's her stage name, and she's in multiple different projects around the Colorado area. And she reached out to us following the podcast we did with Afton about the Cool Girl and talking about, women's issues and problems women's face in the music industry today. Man, I'm starting to, flub my words there. But she wanted to talk about some of the stuff as well. So she sent me some of her stuff, and I'm like looking her up, and she's a board-certified music therapist. She is a licensed counselor. She's also a professional musician, songwriter, and sits on the board of the Colorado Musicians Union as a women's community leader. So I wanted to see what she had to say. I wanted to talk to her about some of this stuff. And we had one of the most enlightening conversations I think I've ever had on this podcast in terms of what she talked about around her expertise in music therapy, how helpful that is. We connect on a lot of that stuff. And we also talk about different issues that, not only women, but also marginalized communities face in the music industry today. Some of the stories, some of the things that have come up. Also, how she has studied this stuff as a music therapist and as a counselor. And we put it all together to basically kind of give a little bit of an idea of, as a music community, what can we do to help start to fix some of these issues from our own personal standpoint as fans, as band members, as literally anything in the music community, as individuals in the music community, I should say, to fix some of these issues and really create that whole entire family vibe that we want to have in the music industry and as the rock and metal community, but also how to, start out small, take that family vibe of the rock and metal community, grow it to the way that we want to grow it to, and how that small change can affect everything else. Guys, ready for this one? This one's a good one. Let's go! Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of the Chord Progression Podcast. Following an episode we did with the band After, we talked a lot about women's issues in the music industry today. I was reached out to by this person right here, and asked to be on the podcast along with all the other things that she does, including she is a board certified music therapist. She is a licensed counselor, a professional musician by Anastasia Rose, a songwriter as well, and also sits on the board of the Colorado Musicians Union as a women's committee leader. So please welcome to the podcast, Anastasia Canfield. So Anastasia, welcome to the Chord Progression Podcast.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Oh, you're very welcome. I got to ask before we get started, did I miss anything in that intro? Because I tried to find as much as I could about you, and I wanted to make sure I hit on every single aspect, but I hope I didn't miss out on anything.
Yeah, no, you got it all. Thanks.
Whew, alrighty. Well, that's fantastic. I got it all right. Yeah. So first up, before we get started, how's everything going in your world today? As you know, we're in the first quarter of 2022. Everything seems to be, especially music-wise, from the pandemic, concerts are back, live music is back. How's everything been going on your end?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this year, is starting to get back to like what we're hoping the world will look like in the music industry. I know a little while ago there were still some things that were getting rescheduled or canceled and stuff, but we seem to be coming out of that. We've still had a lot of gigs. I've still had a lot of gigs. In fact, I have one tonight. And so that's promising. And in some ways, I think the pandemic has actually reignited people's desire for live music, because like being stripped of it, so suddenly and so just everything was gone. People started to realize like there's something different about live music than there is like a live stream concert or just, listening. And so I think as concerts do start coming back, we've had pretty good attendance. We've had, venues are more likely, and more restaurants and all sorts of places are starting to incorporate live music that didn't necessarily have it before. So a lot of good things, but then I don't know, I feel like we're still not quite out of the woods yet, and still kind of figuring out like, what does this look like? What do we need to be cautious about? What are things that we need to be considering? The vaccine cards or whatever, that's a thing here in Colorado. But then also singing and playing brass and stuff, like, do we need to have bill covers or whatever? Like, there's a lot of things that are still kind of in the works with that. But overall, I think we're trending in the right direction. Is that what you kind of see too?
From what I've seen, I mean, again, I'm in a completely different part of the country. I'm over here in Wisconsin as well. So whenever I go to see live shows, I'm always in, I'm from Milwaukee, so I'm always around here. Or I'll go north to Green Bay, go west to Madison. Or this year, I've gone plenty of times down to Chicago for shows, and I'm not afraid to go and do that, because if there's a show I want to go see, I'm going to go see it. Live music is a huge part for me, a huge part of what I like to do. And I mean, when it got taken away from us, like, it felt like my family kind of got taken away from me at a certain point, along with what actually happened with the pandemic, where all of a sudden I couldn't really see many members of my family due to the shutdown, due to, quarantine, isolation, all that kind of stuff. But when everything started coming back, it was fantastic to see just the people coming back out there. And of course, people were hesitant at first. There were people that were hesitant at first that weren't necessarily like fully invested into going to concerts before the pandemic. They wanted to, but they wanted to wait it out a little bit. But you did get that group of people that this was like exactly what they love to do. So everyone was going full force there. And since I would say July of 2021, because that was when I really probably saw like the first like group of shows here. After that, it's just, everyone's trying to figure out things, but the fact that live music was back, that was the key. And it was just like, this is fantastic, because now everything's back. Everyone's still trying to figure out stuff with touring, with when you're at the venues, what's going to go on with these vaccine requirements, what's going to go on with masking, what's going to go on with when it comes to the musicians on stage, if you're going to cover your instruments in any sort of way, if you're have like a brass or like a woodwind section where you have to use, basically use your breath, because the coronavirus was passed through, droplets through your lungs, I think it was probably the correct way to put it. I'm not sure. But On
Airborne, yeah.
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 Yeah, I was airborne. So there's a lot of different things that had to be thought about on that front. And it feels like we were figuring out as we went along. And it seems like as we're into, at pretty much the end of the first quarter of 2022, a lot of that seems to have been figured out, but there's still certain things that still have to be dealt with the coronavirus, especially when, I went to go see that Under Oath Bad Omen Spirit Box tour when they were down in Chicago. And Spirit Box couldn't perform because one of the members of the Spirit Box team tested positive for coronavirus. So how does this all still work into play as, we're in 2 years since the absolute shutdown of everything. How are things still evolving? However, the fact that we're still able to go out and see live music and be in these spaces the way that we somewhat used to be, there does seem to be that light at the end of the tunnel where the family vibe of it is back. So we're not watching these concerts on a computer screen where we're trying to go crazy, but we're doing the confines of our own like bedrooms or living rooms or basements. We're not doing it at a venue or anywhere that's playing live music with a bunch of people that want to be there enjoying the music just as much as we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's so interesting about, I didn't think about this until you mentioned, like one of those band members testing positive, but I wasn't at this show. I knew someone who was, but Black Veil Brides came through Denver, I think in like September or something, and their drummer tested positive. And so instead of canceling the show, they just decided they were going to do an acoustic show, which I thought was like actually a really cool, really cool for the audience that was there. Like they still had a show, it wasn't necessarily exactly what they were expecting. Some people were probably kind of upset, but like that would have been maybe a once in a lifetime sort of situation that Black Veil Brides decided, on a whim, like, well, this thing happened. So what can we do about it? We can cancel our show, or we can do something different. And so that kind of, I thought that was a cool alternative.
I have to agree with you on that. It just shows the ability to adapt to the situation that's being put in front of you. And throughout the pandemic, we all have had to do that. It from any aspect, especially from your aspect, being, a musician yourself, with how when everything got shut down all of a sudden, okay, live music, that's not happening. Going to a recording studio, trying to record stuff for all the bands I've even talked to as well, that wasn't happening unless you had something set up on your own. It's really the only way you could get out and connect with people with your music was just basically online. That was it. You couldn't really do anything else besides that. So I think through that, especially with what you brought up with Black Veil Brides, it shows the ability to adapt to this sort of uncertainty that's still going on, even though I think as time goes on, we're starting to get more certain and more, of a structure of how everything is going to go on with live music and tours. And it's going to continue down that direction. But with the pandemic, with the coronavirus still a prevalent thing at times, we're going to have to be able to adapt to that and flow with that.
Absolutely. Another thing that I thought about with you bringing up recording studios. So one of the bands that I'm in is called Then I Fly. It's a ska punk band. We were actually locked down in the studio. we had studio time booked. And so we were there. And then, like we all got the emergency messages or whatever, like stay at home, all of that stuff. And we had give or take a week booked in the studio. And so they're like, well, since they said you have to just stay here, like you just have to stay in place, like since you were planning to be here anyway, if you want, you can still record. So we were like, hell yeah, let's do it. So we actually spent the first week of the pandemic recording a new release that came out later in 2020. But that was such a unique situation too. I don't know anybody else who can say that they were locked down in a recording studio. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, for most people, that stuff was canceled because you would have been coming from other places. We were already there. Fortunately, it was just very serendipitous. And we were able to complete our track and stuff. But it's funny to think back. Gosh, it's almost exactly 2 years ago now at this point, like when the lockdowns were starting, and like, it feels like a whole different world. at that point in time versus now. And like, this has been so normalized. And at that point we're like, oh, 2 weeks to flatten the curve or whatever. And, and here we are 2 years later. But yeah, it's, man, the naivety that we had.
Yeah, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and 2 years later, I mean, we're getting out of it, and seems like socially, especially, we're much more out of it than maybe the medical term of like ending a pandemic. However, it's still part of what's going on, so there's still issues going on. There's still a prevalent thing that we do have to watch out for.
Yeah, of course.
And out of all the bands I've talked to since the pandemic, and I've probably interviewed at least 200 bands on this podcast, I have and talked to many others as well. I've never heard a story about when the lockdown happened. A band got locked down in the studio. So we
were locked down at the blasting room in Fort Collins.
Okay, if you're gonna get locked down at any studio, you got locked down at the blasting room. Come on, like that's perfect.
Yep. Shout out to Chris Beeble.
Because I'm just thinking, like, every time I hear people talk about the blasting room, I'm just, I've always got like positive like thoughts around there. Because every time people talk about recording there, it's just like, oh my god, this was like one of the best experiences ever. And then and my favorite band has probably recorded like their last like 5 or 6 albums out of there exclusively, and it's just like keep it rolling.
Against.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we were there. Like they were. So part of the reason why this happened is we actually had studio time booked a little bit earlier, but Rise Against was taking a little bit longer than they expected. And so they're like, hey, we kind of have to prioritize them. Can you like push your time back? And so we like figured that out. And it just so happened that was the week that everything went down. But yeah, Rise Against, we almost would have overlapped with them actually when we were there. But when we started getting all of the, news about coronavirus, whatever is before all, so we heard on the news several weeks before the lockdown, or at least we did in Colorado. I don't know if that was necessarily across the US. But they had ended their time a little bit earlier. So we didn't end up crossing paths with them. But yes. All of us in the Then I Fly are huge Rise Against fans. So we, yep.
Well, shoot, I'm going to have to come out to Colorado and see a Rise Against concerts with the whole entire band and just enjoy and have a good time. Because if I get a chance to see a Rise Against concert, I'm there.
Yeah. We'd love to host you. Maybe you can come to a Then I Fly show while you're out here.
I'd be honored to. I mean, I love going to shows as much as possible. Plus, if you're talking about ska punk, I mean, that's right up my alley as well. So I'm there.
Sweet.
So going a little bit more into other things that you've done as well, because also, as I rattled off in the whole entire intro, you're a board certified music therapist, a licensed counselor as well. How did you get into all of that? Just because seeing how it also crosses paths with you being a musician as well, it really funnels into like this whole entire, what feels like for me, a full circle moment where you're using music to, help express yourself as well, do something you absolutely love, and then adding on to that to also help others.
Yeah. So I own a private practice. I also teach and stuff too. But mainly I do music therapy in a private practice setting, mostly individuals and some groups, but my bachelor's degree is in music. My first master's degree is in neurologic music therapy. And really, I mean, I don't know that there was necessarily like one thing that like sparked this, like, oh, I have to go this direction with my life. Like, we all as musicians, and even not just music consumers and stuff too, know that there's therapeutic elements in music and there's healing elements in music. And as a teenager, like most teenagers, I was pretty angsty and, felt like music was the only thing that understood me, all of that. Music is my one true friend, very emo. And, but I thought I was going to study music education, be like a band director or something like that. But whenever I was looking into that, I had to do a career investigation project. in high school, like most of us do, I came across an intro to music therapy class and was like, oh, music therapy, what is that? That sounds very interesting. And so I looked into it. Where I did my undergrad, actually had a music therapy program, but I got my degree in music and then went on to graduate school in music therapy. A lot of my friends are music therapists, both from my bachelor's and first master's. But basically when it came down to it is like I couldn't deny how important music was in my own healing and in my own just understanding of myself, in my own like introspection and my own identity, really. And I was like, I can't be the only one that would benefit from, some like just really structured therapeutic experience in music. And we always get we get those like narratives and messages that, you're never going to make it in the arts and things like that. And I never really truly believed that, but it also was like a little bit of like, hey, this is a good backup too, like if something doesn't happen. But whenever I got into grad school for music therapy, I was like, this stuff is amazing. So music therapy is the clinical use of music to benefit someone's life. So like functional goals, for example, a lot of the work that I do is in mental health. And so we might process things through songwriting. For example, if someone has struggles with sharing their trauma narrative, we might put that into a song and reach catharsis that way. We might also use music as a tool for relaxation. I do some music guided deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. I'm a pianist first. I play a bunch of other things, but so I'll use the range of the piano, the rhythmic structure and the and harmonic structure to like that our bodies just naturally kind of respond to help people take a deeper breath or to slow down their breathing, slow down their heart rate, so that they can, just relax. They can relax their nervous system. If someone's traumatized, they have a higher likelihood of going into that fight, flight, or freeze place. And so using music in a very functional way to bring that down, to calm them, to ground them. Another example could be like using music in, we do a lot of live music playing with our clients. And so using drums, for example, so hand drums, things like that, that are very approachable for most people. And when you're playing really any instrument, but especially a drum where someone is like less, like they're less intimidated by that than something like a piano, because they're like, oh my God, there's so many notes, I'm going to play something wrong. But if they have a djembe in front of them, for example, not to reduce djembe players or diminish that at all, there's definitely, there's technique and stuff there, but it is a little bit more approachable for the average person. Playing that drum, you're getting sensory input from your tactile sense, from your vestibular sense, because you're having to move your arm or move your body to get to the drum, the visual sense, your auditory sense, obviously. And so all of those things organize your brain in a way that a lot of other activities just don't. And whenever your brain is getting a lot of sensory input and like integrating that in a motor way, somatosensory and motor way, then you're less likely to be stuck in your limbic system, which is where people who are traumatized kind of live, like that fight or flight place. Pulls you out of that. And it's also something that just grounds you. It aligns a lot of things, if you will. That was a little bit of a digression, but hopefully that's kind of answers your question.
Well, I mean, you put a lot of information in there, and I'm glad you did, just because when it comes to the whole entire idea around music therapy, that's one thing that even for myself, like I'm a huge proponent of it. I'm glad that there are a lot of other people out there that see it that way and are also using it as, but in a clinical sense, because even for myself, when it comes to music, I'm much more intense and like focusing on the audio part of it. Where I heard this one quote, I can't remember who it came from, but it was something like art decorates space, but music decorates time. So whenever I listen to music, there's always something there with the way that the message of the song is, the way the artist wants to put across whatever message of the song is, whatever story they're trying to tell, along with the way the instrumentals are impacting the emotion of that story, whether it's how heavy the drums are going to be, whether the lightest tap on the hi-hat or the crash cymbal, whether the guitars, if they're down tuned, if they're getting a Napoleonic style to them, whatever they're doing, however the bass interacting, and then with the vocalist, however they're using their voice, if it's softer, it's more whispered, if it's this forceful, clean style, or if that's that guttural scream from an unclean sense. Everything works in there to tell a story from an emotional standpoint. And even for myself, I've gone through a couple of times in life where I was not in the best place, and music was the thing that helped pull me out of it. And because music was the thing that helped pull me out of it, this is why I'm doing this right here, because I connected to it so much that I just wanted to keep rolling with it. And when I listen to music, sometimes I will actually connect with those songs and go back to certain parts where I feel like those songs are going to be speaking to me. So I'll take that core emotion from that song and then put it into like my own story and get a better understanding of something that I may have gone through, what had gone on. And then I end up being able to understand certain things that I, maybe have missed during that time period. There was a period of time in my life where I just absolutely was just not doing well, depressed, hated myself. I'm not going to go any further in it, but all of a sudden, right before the pandemic hit, this band called Polaris released an album called The Death of Me. And I was listening through it on a way to a show, and there was this one song that I started playing called Above My Head. And I listened to it, and I liked it, but I didn't really, give too much thought to it. All of a sudden, I listened to it one more time, and it just clicked. It basically, for me, it described emotionally everything I'd gone through in 2017 and just kind of put it more in a perspective. And through listening to it a couple times more, it allowed me to understand where the main source of what caused me to go down that path, where that main source actually was versus what I thought it was. So being able to understand that and now be able to grow from that and be able to understand where my life was at that point to now, it's helped me become a much more confident person myself, much happier, and just enjoying a lot more about life based on the fact that I can use music to relate to myself, understand more things about myself, and unlock things that maybe just by, in a different sense of in a different style of clinical therapy, I wouldn't be able to. It's just the way that your brain works, the way your brain connects, and because those sounds can connect with so many different emotions and can pull things out of people and can really get them to realize certain things about themselves to help the healing process start. I'm super thankful that you are doing something like this where you're helping people do that might not be able to do that on their own like I was able to.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about all of the, so as I mentioned, my first master's degree is in neurologic music therapy. And so much of that schooling was about the neurological processing of music and the psychology of music, the neuroscience of music. And whenever you break down like a song like that you mentioned that you really connect to, like all of those elements our brain is processing in similar and different ways. So for example, you're listening, like we naturally respond to rhythm. Like if you think about it, like our bodies are just go through life in a rhythm. Our heartbeat are like, we figure out our heart rate and our blood pressure through basically the rhythm of our bodies. And we speak in a certain way that's rhythmic so that we can understand each other. And we, there's so much of that anyway. So rhythm is at the core of human life, really. And so we naturally respond to that. Like if you've ever, like been walking down a hallway and you hear somebody with like high heels or something, like really like loud shoes, you can't help but like kind of entrain to that. That's your brainstem kind of being like, oh, here is our rhythmic structure here. And so that's happening while you're listening to music. That's why people dance, and that's how we can responds to music in that way, or like just moving to music. You're responding to music lyrics through the speech center of your brain. That's a different aspect. So your brainstem, your prefrontal cortex is where your speech center is. So whenever you're processing lyrics, that's engaged. Whenever you are listening to melodies and harmonies, your temporal, well, when you're listening to anything really, your temporal lobes are engaged. And whenever you emotionally connect to something, your limbic system is engaged. And whenever you're thinking about other things, that's a higher order function, and that's more of your frontal cortex too. So when people say like music makes you smarter, like there is neuroscience to say that even whenever you are like listening to something that you are really enjoying and that you connect to, your brain is working in a different way, and it's working kind of in the background. That's part of why music therapy works so well too, is like it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel the same. You don't feel the same burnout as you do in some other aspects of therapy. And it also is very accessible for people. You can be sitting in the car and be like, oh my gosh, like this is like my episodic memory is kicking in because I'm thinking about all of like this whole year, 2017, that this song helps me process. And so, anyway, little nerdy there, but
a little nerdy there, but it's something that, I mean, when people end up thinking about it and really able to start processing, what you said through this, one thing that's going to happen is you're going to be able to connect with just this idea of how music connects with you and the way that, your brain ends up working within it, and how it affects potentially, sometimes your mood, how it enhances that mood. So it's like, when we're feeling sad, a lot of people will listen, those sad emo kind of songs just because it might amplify what they're going through. However, it might bring more light to it, might bring more understanding to it and help them emotionally process it. When you're feeling happy, you're listening to stuff that's going to be upbeat, that you're really enjoying, and always connects positively to you to, again, enhance that. If you're like me and you all go to the gym a lot, all of a sudden you're listening to stuff that's going to get you amped up, that's going to get you wanting to go and do something like that. And it's for me, it's just something I always look at as it's an enhancement on life. Like it's a natural enhancement to where, like you said, our bodies are always moving in rhythm at some point because we got a heartbeat, and that's always what's driving it. And then what you were saying about with shoes, you hear someone walking down like with high heels or very loud shoes, you're walking by them. Before you know it, you're going to be walking in unison with that because you're hearing it. Even like, I'll use a mosh pit as an example. We know when some of these heavier songs are playing, we know when some of the heavier parts are going to come, and we go at it and we hit during those heavier parts. And everyone's going to do it at the same time. And trust me, it's one of the funnest things ever. I can't wait to do it later tonight. So yeah. But on top of that, it's just something where how much connection you're able to make with it and how much science is actually behind it when it comes to enhancing positivity, enhancing, just making yourself feel better about, things you're going through, what you're doing, or understanding what you're going through, kind of how I use certain songs as well. Even when I go and do podcasts and I look at bands when they release albums and I want to talk about these albums, I will go through as deeply as possible on every single song because I want to pull out some of these things and see, maybe where I can connect on some of these things and see how powerful these songs truly are, because these artists aren't putting these songs together on a whim. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of, potential emotion and pain and agony or joy behind them. You never know what's behind them. I want to pull that out and see what's there because you never know what might happen to you're listening to it. All of a sudden you feel that emotion. You never know what you might be able to relate to it in your life and be able to realize certain things or enhance the positivity that was behind it and just give this tangible, give something that's intangible, a tangible way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The validation that we get through music is something that's kind of inexplicable too. Like listening to something that kind of, it just hits where you're at, and that's something that we all, there's a lot of research behind, the importance of validation, emotional validation. And that's something across helping professions. That's not just in music therapy, but music can do that without us having to use words for it. That's the cool thing. Sorry, that was my dog. But music can do that without us necessarily having to use words. And that's a really cool a really cool thing too, that there can be camaraderie that's built around that. There is. I mean, that's the reason why live music exists, is we all come to this one event for this one reason. And that's like, when we think about that from like a sociological or even anthropological perspective, like that's so cool. That's community building. That's testament to the safe space that music provides too.
Oh, absolutely. And especially with me loving rock and metal, everything around there, there have been plenty of times, and I know this isn't, for everything that's happened, because of course, in any situation, you're going to have good things happen and bad things that happen. But when it comes to rock and metal, going to shows, there's always this family vibe that's there. I mean, heck, in mosh pits, all of a sudden someone falls down. The first rule of the pit is, if someone falls down, you pick them back up. It's not like, oh, you're not worthy, you fell down. No. You pick them back up. Even on times where all of a sudden, like, I've knocked people down, it's just like, I will pick them right back up. Or you see people fall in front of me, it's like I see people picking them up. I'm running like right behind them, and I'm like kind of like going like spread eagle, like whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, okay,
Right.
just try and help this person. And if they're hurt, then all of a sudden you put up the X like this. The artist notices it. They stop showing. The help comes and helps that person out. Professional help that helps them out. Or just another great example of that, just when it comes to building that community and just having that safe space in there. Here's a good example of it. So this was back in September. I was at Blue Ridge Rock Fest out in Virginia. And this is not what happened all out there, because I've got whole other, I think, topics and talking points about what happened out there. But I'm talking about specifically about when I saw the band Beartooth. So during their song Disease, I mean, we were in the pit, we're going nuts, and all of a sudden we're seeing a couple people like in the middle of the pit, and they're like breaking down, crying because of how impactful emotionally that song is to them. All of us in the pit, we kind of like looked at that, and instead of, going crazy, continue to go on because it's a fun song to go and mosh to, everyone kind of rallied around them and was just kind of like hyping them up kind of in a way, just because you're creating this space where, we see you're emotional. We understand how much this song means to you. So why not bring more positivity to that if we can, and just create this experience where now you're going to go back, whoever, went through that is going to go back and look at that and remember how much of a community that was, where all of a sudden you might be breaking down and just like having a struggle emotional moment, and all these people are coming here to support you during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that makes me tear up a little bit, like hearing that. That's so awesome. And yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, and historically speaking, like we've gone away from this very much in our society, but like at the beginning of history, there's so much, like, that's how people connected, is they played music at night. They would get together with their families, their tribes, or whatever, and they would make music, or they would be observers or dancers or whatever. And we see that in some still like very traditional cultures, and I love to hear that, because that tells me that we're not entirely lost as like this society. But that stuff is so important, and it's beyond words. The impact that has, and I'm sure the impact that had on those people that you rallied around, like you said, is like inexplicable.
Well, even the impact it has on the people that, were the people that were rallying around them, because we got to actually, we're always talking about how we're a family, how we're connected. Like, when we actually get to see something like that happen to one of our, rock and metal family members, we're going to be there for them. We're going to be there to pick them up. We're going to be there to make sure that they're okay, that they're going to be in the best position possible. And when it comes to, you're talking about it, at the beginning of, written human history, beginning of human history, where music was the way to connect, and how it seems like society, we've kind of gotten away from that. It's still there, but it's just not nearly as prevalent, where, I mean, think about it. Anytime a wedding, there's always a reception, there's always music around there that's always going to be positive, because it is a positive celebration. It's two people coming together, it's two families coming together and being joined through love. On top of that, take a look, use Christmas as an example. There's specific music around Christmas to add to the whole entire experience of the season. Any kind of, gathering you go to, music is always being played at some point in time, because it always ends up enhancing the experience of what is going on. It always ends up enhancing the experience of the people that are there. It creates that sort of community and creates some sort of connectiveness that people can connect to. Another example, I went to a concert in October, saw the Mongolian metal band The Who. And I went to the show, and half the people that were at the show were native Mongolians who are from the Milwaukee area or maybe from the Chicago area. I don't know where everyone came from. But then the other half are about basically rock and metal fans. All of a sudden, here come the Who on there, and we could basically tell who the native Mongolians were because they were dressed in very traditional Mongolian clothing. And then you see all this rock and metal fans, me wearing like an Ice Nine Kills t-shirt at the time because I was like, yeah. However, the band goes on stage, and all of a sudden, everyone is basically moving in unison to the band, just with the Mongolian. Everyone's enjoying the concert as fully as possible. So you're seeing two completely different cultures at this point. And multiple different cultures at this point, I should say, coming together to enjoy music of one culture, mixing in with a different type of genre with rock and metal, and everyone just enjoying it and having an absolute blast connecting to that. It's still one of the coolest things I can think of from 2021.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome.
Just everyone and everyone trying to also do like the Mongolian throat singing too, of course. I think I basically, trying to actually blow out my voice during that because it was like, and I trying to go as loud as possible. Of course, by the end of it, I was like, but I tried. One other thing that I saw, when you sent me the stuff that all about you and I was looking at was that you're on the board of the Colorado Musicians Union as a women's committee member or leader, I should say, not a member, a leader. Forgot. I didn't want to mess that up, but I kind of did. So first thing I want to ask about this is, what is the Colorado Musicians Union? What does it stand for? What is it all about? Along with, as a women's committee leader, what do you do for that? And how does it impact women in the Colorado music scene today?
Yes. So a lot of questions there. So the Colorado Musicians Union is we're still very early on. We're still gaining membership. Our missions include really fighting for fair wages for musicians. So that's one of the things. So it's multifaceted. That's one of the things. But then also combating any sort of discrimination or abuse of musicians in the scene. So if you think about it, a lot of musicians, particularly gigging musicians that are kind of independent in their own way, they or even bands that even might have a manager or something like that, there's just not representation from a structural standpoint to protect musicians. So it's really easy for people to be in situations where they're abused financially or abused emotionally or even physically and sexually too. And so the Colorado Musicians Union is formed to serve as a conduit for where people can come and seek support and seek safety, and there can be some accountability held. So we did a couple protests last summer at a few different venues that are owned by a guy named Jay Bianchi, who is a known predator in the Denver area. And particularly, so there's numerous accounts, if you Google this guy, of, either not paying bands, beating up guys in bands, beating up girls in bands, and sexual harassment, sexual assault, things like that. And so we organized some protests around some of his venues. And that's just an example of what some of the things that we're working on. But yeah, if you think about it, if you work for the government, for example, there's all of these workplace violence things that you have to trainings you have to do. Or if you work in a school or things like that, there's things that you have to, that doesn't necessarily deter people, but there's supposed to be a structure for that, but there's not for something like being a gigging musician. And that puts people, particularly marginalized musicians, in some really dangerous situations. So that kind of blends into my role as the women's committee leader, is one, lifting up female voices in the Colorado music scene. Actually, this month I'm doing what I call a hashtag Woman Crush Wednesday project. So each Wednesday I'm posting a video on our Facebook page that is an interview with a Colorado Musicians Union contracted female musician, or I give like just some background about some women's issues in the Colorado music scene, or in just the music scene in general. But one of those things that I talked about recently actually was music performance anxiety. That's one of my, I did my second master's thesis on music performance anxiety, and it's much more impactful. Not that other people, not that, you know, majority culture people don't experience music performance anxiety, but marginalized musicians particularly experience at a higher rate and more intensely. And part of that is because of all of the intersections that we're already kind of having to navigate through. Like, the world of music is a microcosm of the world that we live in. So as a woman, I'll speak from my perspective, like, I'm just looked at differently in the world than a man is in general. Like, we know that. And that doesn't change in the music industry. In fact, it's probably even more apparent because only about 1 in 4 musicians is a female musician. And so we stand out like a sore thumb. And same with musicians of color, same with musicians across the gender spectrum, across the sexuality spectrum. Like, we really stand out because there's just not many of us. And so when we look at something like music performance anxiety, it's more likely to impact some of those marginalized people because we're in an industry where we're like, there's hyper focus on us, or there's kind of like erasure. And so like, we either have to work really, really hard to be seen as relevant. And so of course that burnout leads to more anxiety of like, oh my gosh, this is a really important gig. Like, I need people to like be here. I need people to recognize this. Or we're just kind of ignored. Like, I have some examples of, unfortunately, some of the gigs that we go to with Then I Fly. I play in several different projects, but Then I Fly is one of my top priorities. It's a great project, and we do a lot of original music. I'm in a couple of cover bands and stuff too, but I do probably 90+% of the booking and general management of Then I Fly. And sometimes whenever we come to gigs where people haven't heard of us or they don't know me, which is becoming fewer and further between, fortunately. But when they don't know Then I Fly and they don't know me, they look at my bandmates, who are all male. They look at my bandmates first for like, you know, talking about load-in information or like other logistical things, or like who they were like thinking they were emailing, even though I always put my name on an email or whatever, before they'll look at me. And they're like, she's the one who put this together. Why are you looking at us? And so basically that's to say that my role as the women's committee leader is to lift up those voices, also to shed light on the issues that female musicians experience in the music industry. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, Jay Bianchi, it's a higher likelihood for females in the music industry to be sexually harassed, to be sexually assaulted, physically harassed, drugged, things like that. I know several people who know several female musicians who have been drugged at shows that they were performing at or that they were just at. And it's really unfortunate that that's a reality that female musicians are constantly having to like keep in mind. Like, I don't drink, and that's partially why. But also, even if somebody hands me a water, I don't trust that it's not drugged. And that's just a really sad, like, probably it's not, but that little percentage of time that it could be, that little percentage of time that it has happened to people, like that's what stands out in my mind of like, this is a dangerous thing. Like I can't even take a drink from a stranger at a show because I don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, that's my that's my role. That encompasses quite a bit of what I do. I try also to create community and camaraderie between female musicians, because sometimes there can be some like competition, the arts, we're always kind of evaluated. Unfortunately, we should just be looking at it as community, but there is an evaluation piece, even if it's like, did the audience like that song, or do they like us? Are people coming to our shows? Are they buying tickets? Whatever. And so sometimes, since there's some people have like this scarcity mindset, particularly marginalized musicians can think, oh, like I have to be like the female musician. I have to be the person of color in this like project or in this genre or whatever, like rather than seeing everybody benefits from connection and supporting one another. So that's another aspect of my role, is trying to bring people together in that way of like, we don't have to be each other's competition. In fact, if we don't see each other as competition, we all do better. I get asked all the time to do like female fronted band shows and stuff. And that's an example of some of those things, is like, we can put on entire shows and support each other and like love, like, like hype on female fronted bands in the Denver area. So, yeah.
Okay, there was I asked you a good amount of questions leading into that, and then you answered every single one, like full on, full through. So now there's a lot to unpack there for both the audience and
Yeah.
myself as well, because I'm just like listening to this, thinking through this. Like there is so much there that there's gonna be a couple of things that I'm probably gonna end up, maybe glossing over a little bit more than some of the other things, just because there are a couple of things.
There is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a couple of things I really wanted to, really focus in on. And the first thing I want to focus in on is your help with, what you were talking about with music, like music performance anxiety, and then specifically seeing how it relates to marginalized communities and how it is more prevalent within them as sort of, and like with the music industry being a microcosm to the world that's around us today. And I can understand that easily, just because in any industry that you're in, no matter what industry it is, whether it's music, arts, film, finance, it doesn't matter. Literally anything, because it's put together by people in a society. That society, that like little microcosm, is gonna be just a small sample of what the society actually is, and it's gonna be like its own little, like kind of little mini society, like mini society.
Yeah.
So and the fact that you wrote your whole entire thesis on that is incredible, because now there's a couple of questions I really do want to ask you about that. So first off, when it comes to specifically marginalized communities that have increased, music performance anxiety, what are some of the aspects that you, especially through your research, that you saw that really add on to that? On top of that, in your opinion, what are some ways that not only, people that are in the music industry, but also people that are, connected to the music industry in some way, like myself, like the fans, anybody else, can help reduce some of that anxiety and help make sure that those in those marginalized communities, those marginalized, musicians, don't have to go through that sort of music performance anxiety as much, or if at all?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about it, but really, like, it's very individualized, and so it's kind of hard to like say like you can do these 3 things and then poof, it's gone. But really, how other people can support. I'll start there.
Okay.
How other people can support is lifting up those voices, recognizing what it takes to overcome a lot of just lack of representation, and like for example, I also teach brass for a drum and bugle corps, and I recently got a message that someone had forwarded to me from one of the girls in the horn line saying, "I've never had a female instructor before. I'm so excited to meet Anastasia and like be taught by her." And like that never dawned on me as like, yeah, for a lot of these people, like I'm the first person that they have seen and have been able to connect to and relate to, identify with in that aspect. And same, like it's the same in like the performance. That's one of the education things that I do, but the performance world too is like recognizing whenever people are different than the norm, and recognizing that that's an accomplishment for that person, whether they consciously realize that or not. Like they have had to take on so much shit basically, to get where they're at, and have had to probably work so much harder than a lot of the people around them that have had a lot of that representation, that has been normalized, that they're involved in that industry or they're involved in that scene or that project. And so yeah, one, recognizing those things, highlighting those things, lifting those voices up. Also not putting people, we have a tendency, and this is often very subconscious, we have a tendency to, when someone is different, kind of hyper focus on them, or like I said, or, you know, just not focus on them at all. But if you're on the hyper focus, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but recognizing they're human too. Like from the female perspective, a lot of times we have to overperform to be taken seriously. So I have to perform better than a lot of my bandmates to be seen as good as them. And so recognizing that is a thing, and that is something that like that people who are marginalized, people who are different in the scene are allowed to make mistakes too. I get the sense that that's already kind of inherent in you. Like you're very like family, like camaraderie, community sort of focused. But like in general, people sometimes will do that. Like they'll see a female musician, or they'll see a person of color, and they'll be like, oh, they played a wrong note. Like, oh, they suck. But like, they're not paying attention to the rest of the band that also fucked up, you know? And so recognizing that we have those tendencies, whenever we're focused on somebody, or, you know, the opposite, recognizing whenever we're not giving credit where credit's due. On the individual level, how people can combat music performance anxiety is doing some self-reflection, like where did that anxiety where did I first start to realize that I was experiencing anxiety? And a lot of times it's in an evaluation sort of situation. Like I know, like I went to music school and stuff. And so some of those situations related to feedback that I either got from instructors or feedback that I got from other people in my cohort or things like that. And sometimes that feedback is not always very nice, and sometimes it's not very helpful. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the actual performance, and it's really just an avenue that someone took to personally insult you. And so like teasing those things out, like when someone said that I am like, I'm shitty at piano, like what was going on with them? Was that a reflection on them, or was that really a reflection on me? Am I really shitty at piano? Probably not. That's probably like where they were at. That's probably their shit that they were putting on me. And so like starting to kind of sift through those things and combat those negative statements that we have sort of taken on as truth. Feedback is a cool thing because we can reject it. You know, like that's one thing that I also like to tell people is like, you know, people can say stuff about you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And our feedback and our evaluation, especially whenever we're like looking to get better as a musician, we're looking to to grow and to get more clout, more recognition, sometimes we really hyper focus on those negative statements. But I also like to remind people, like, the haters help you get there too.
Mm-hmm.
Because the haters are still talking about you, like, love me or hate me. It's still like, if you're talking about me, you're helping me get somewhere. Like, we see that in our media all the time with like really famous musicians. Like, people can talk shit, but they're still talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, flipping the script in that way can be another way that can be kind of empowering. And recognizing just what's going on in your body. So physiologically, when we're anxious in any sort of way, our body responds to that. So, some typical responses, physiological responses, are like shortness of breath. We start to sweat, maybe people get a little lightheaded, things like that. So take care of your body. Like, what do you need? Do you need to do you need to drink a glass of water? Do you need to take a moment and deep breathe? Like, do you need to do some yoga or whatever, like you do? And how do you deal with anxiety in and of itself? Music performance anxiety is not so often. So there's different types of anxiety. And this is something that I go through in my paper. There's trait anxiety and there's state anxiety. And oftentimes people who experience a lot of music performance anxiety have both. So trait anxiety is what it sounds like. It's a trait of who you are. It's part of your personality. You go through life in an anxious way. And so, like, that's where, you can start to develop skills that you do every day to combat your anxiety. When do you feel more anxious? Is it a certain time of day? Is it after you have done a certain task or activity, or after you've talked to a certain person or a certain type of person? Like, evaluating those things for yourself. And then state anxiety is whenever you're in a particular situation or a particular state of mind, if you will. And so you can use some of those same skills that you've developed from your trait anxiety, like combating your trait anxiety in your state anxiety situation, but then also like using some of those mind games of like, it doesn't matter if the haters are talking about me because they're still talking about me, and that's a good thing. Or like, if like, I can choose to reject somebody's negative statement about me, or I can choose to take pieces of it. Like, if they did give some good feedback, but then they're like, oh, but otherwise you suck. Like, mm-hmm. I don't know, you could change the fingering on that line or whatever, but otherwise the piece sucks. Like, cool, I can change the fingering on that line. Everything else I don't need. And and so so starting to be your own ally in that way. Recognize that people are always reflections of where they're at too. And a lot of times the people that are saying really negative things about you are also saying really negative things about themselves, inside of themselves. And that's not your problem. That's not your fault. That's a very surface level way to deal with it, but hopefully there's some skills in there that people can take away.
And there definitely should be some skills there that people can take away. And I think I can kind of add to that too, but not from, necessarily the academic perspective, but from the personal perspective, because of having to deal with some of these things, especially, doing these podcasts, doing a lot of different things on the internet as well in terms with the music. So a couple of things is when it comes to, being able to start, potentially breaking down some anxiety on a singular level, I think of it very similar to, working out. You're going to want to, if you want to lift a lot of weight, you're not going to want to go and just jump in and try and lift all that weight, because you're not going to be able to do it, and you're not going to be able to handle it. You got to baby step your way up to it in a similar way where, so every single Wednesday night, I do a live stream on Instagram, and I'm always just there talking to people, just doing seeing whatever happens. And back in 2019, I had a couple of people that started joining every single week. They were talking back and forth, but they never really were, comfortable, maybe jumping on camera, doing, the screen share kind of thing, and just really being a part of that. And it's like, okay, you know, that's fine. If you want to jump in, feel free to jump in whenever you're ready, but continue to talk through this. All of a sudden, now they're starting to jump in a little bit more, to the point where now a lot of that anxiety that they had about potentially doing something on their own had been dropped because they took those baby steps. I'm glad I was able to help out with that. To now, some of them, they're doing podcasts of their own in different aspects. They're doing TikTok channels on their own in different aspects, and just really trying to start something for themselves. And yeah, you know, it's online. You're going to end up getting those negative comments. And as humans, we tend to focus in on some of those negative things as well. I'm guilty of that myself. Even the most popular podcast I ever did with the band called The Warning, I went through everything on there and I looked at the like to dislike ratio on YouTube, and it was like 99.6 likes. I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome. But I saw the one dislike and I saw the one negative comment, and that's the one, of course, naturally as a human, that's where my mind went to. And the negative comment was, oh man, you know, you should you just talk too much. You should let them talk more, and you should just ask questions. I'm like, wait a minute. Let's take a look at the other comments and see what happened. Everyone was so much happier with the style of the conversation because it was something completely different than they've had from anybody else that interviewed one of their favorite bands. So it kind of, there's that validation point, but also taking a look at that negativity where I'm like, I can see where that person is coming from. However, like you said, there are times where you can take some of that negativity criticism as constructive criticism, but sometimes it is a microcosm of what those people are going through. I've had that happen before as well. Back in 2019, I did a YouTube series list of best albums of the year, best songs of the year. I also did worst albums of the year, worst songs of the year, because I wanted to do it. And one of them that I put up for worst album of the year was the AJR album that came out in 2019. Full disclosure, I mean, if you like AJR, that's totally fine, totally cool. Just not my cup of tea. So that's why, and it just didn't, just not my kind of thing. So I put that up there, and I had a lot of comments from AJR fans coming on after me, about my opinion. Like saying, oh no, you're wrong, like you suck this. My response always was, well, can you tell me why you like the album? And actually trying to start a dialogue on that front to see what had happened. All of a sudden, maybe 90% of the people that I ended up responding to with that, what ended up happening was they gave me a full explanation of what their opinion of the album was and how they connected with it. So from there, it's something where I would always respond with, thank you, something like, thank you for letting me know. And then I'd actually, talk to them about what they thought, about what they felt, and about how they connected to it. And one thing I would say is don't take my opinion as something that's going to, potentially make you not listen to that band. If you connect so strongly with them and so positively with them, by God, please keep listening to them. Don't let me change up your perspective on that or anything. But I'm glad we had this conversation, because now you can see, I just don't connect with that kind of music in any sort of way. And I might connect, or if I do, it's just not a strong or even positive connection. But I see you do, and I don't want my opinion to influence how you're feeling. Otherwise, they get, why I just like it, or why do you think about it? No, your opinion just is wrong. It's like, okay, that's also a microcosm of what they're going through. So you can kind of understand a little bit more of what not to. It's just sort of building up on those baby steps as well. And then even from a fan's perspective on, helping out with that performance anxiety from people in marginalized communities, one thing we can do is, say we're going to shows. And I'll use that Who concert as a perfect example. Went to that show, and there was a band that was opening up for them called The Haunt. I had never heard of The Haunt before. People around me had never heard of The Haunt before. And we're looking through we're trying to look on Google, who is this band? What do they sound like? What can we expect? 5 minutes before they go on. And we're looking on there, and we see one that's an alternative rock band and one that's a deathcore band. We're like, well, the Who is, Mongolian metal, so we're kind of expecting the deathcore band to come out. All of a sudden, here comes the alternative rock band, who has a frontwoman singer and a female bassist. And all of a sudden, they come out on stage, and we look at each other like, well, this isn't what we were expecting. However, we have no idea what their music sounds like. We have no idea what's going to be like. So instead of just trying to, create some weird preconceived notion about what's actually going on here, let's just listen to the music. Let's enjoy it. Let's just see what happens. You never know. And after 2 songs, we were all looking at each other like, yeah, this fits. This is good. It fit the flow and everything. The energy was there, perfect for the show. And we're and people that are around there are getting into this. And it's all because, when they went on stage, and instead of us being in the crowd oh, this isn't what we expected, it's well, let's actually see if this is let's see what this is. Let's actually give this a fair shake, and let's not create some preconceived notion around there. And when you go to smaller shows as well, you're going to see a lot of other bands that are trying to make it just, honestly, just give them a fair shake. That's going to be the best thing that's going to be one of the best things you could possibly do as a fan. Just give them a fair shake, because you never know what to expect. I mean, take a look at all the different reaction videos on YouTube from the song Pisces by Ginger. You listen to the first like 2 minutes of the song and Tatiana's singing. It's very smooth, very calming, melodic. All of a sudden it breaks, it gets heavier, and she unclean screams heavier than most men out there. And I love seeing the reactions. It freaks people out, but it freaks people out in such a positive way. It's like, you just give it a fair shake. Just give it a listen. Just give these performers a chance. And if the sound's not something that you want, it's something that resonates with you, that's fine. We all have different preferences. But if you don't know what it is, why not give it a fair shake? And then those performers that are up there, they're going to see that more people are in the crowd. More people are there to go and see them perform. Yeah, it might be a little bit more anxiety at the beginning of it, but as time goes on, it's like, yeah, those people are still there to see you. They're there to support you and what you're doing. Even if they know the band that they really want to support is later on the bill, they're going to be there for you, to watch you and see what happens. And I found plenty of bands I've liked that way just by going to shows where I've liked a certain band that's on the show. That's why I went, but I stayed for the whole entire thing because I wanted to see what else would happen. And honestly, it's well worth it. So that's one way, as, fans, from a fan's perspective, I think we can also aid in, helping to diminish some of that performance anxiety for anybody, but also specifically people in those marginalized communities.
Yeah, I love that. Just being open to receiving, receiving what they have to offer. And like, that is a huge thing. It's like, just, we all as performers, as musicians, have the same goal of like, we want to share our music, and like being open to that is, paramount, really. So I love that. Thanks.
Oh, it's something that, I do want to keep pushing out there, is like, just give it a chance, not give peace a chance, give bands a chance. Like, just go with that kind of mantra in a different way. And also now kind of shifting over to the, with you being a women's committee leader on the Colorado Musicians Union board, one other thing that you mentioned was, when you're going and doing gigs, also, certain members, like, management for these venues, they're focused on the rest of the members of your band and not looking at you in the same light. All of a sudden it's like, well, what do we need? Who do we give the instructions for load in, load out? Who do we, take care of this stuff? And they're talking to them. It's like, well, no, it's her. Did you not read the email? Her name was on it. When I talked with the band Afton, they had the exact same style of story where they would always talk to the man in the group, and all of a sudden it was the woman in the group that took care of everything. That was leading the band. That was the one that was doing all the load in, load out, all the booking and stuff. So my other question is when it comes to not only specifically the Colorado music scene, but also, because it's microcosm of the music scene as a whole, what are some other issues that you're seeing women in the scene face right now? And what are some ways that not only the women in the scene can, potentially help out on those issues and, maybe start to diminish some of those issues in terms of importance, in terms of like, how prevalent they are? Basically, fix the issues, I should say. That's a better way to put it. Not diminish issues, fix the issues, along with how we, the fans, can do the exact same thing as well and help out on that front.
Yeah. So some more issues. I mean, it really all kind of stems from that same place of just not being valued in the same way. And so, like, I think all female musicians, or the overwhelming majority at least, have different stories of different things that stem from just not being looked at in the same way. Like, I know that also for me, that sometimes I'm just seen as like the pretty face in the band, and then there's not necessarily recognition of like my actual like music performance, like, oh, you're beautiful, whatever. And it's like, thanks, great, but that's not why I'm here. Like, if that was like all that I like wanted, like, this would not be the industry that I would be pursuing if that's like, if beauty was like just the thing. And I think a lot of female musicians face some aspect of that, like on either side of the coin, really. Like, if you are an attractive female musician, then that is one thing that people will always mention, or always like, that's going to be something that they see first prior to your talent, or if you are not as traditionally attractive, or if you are like non-binary and there's some androgyny that you present as or something, then some people might reduce you in that way too, kind of the alternate, like you're not pretty enough kind of thing. You're not pretty enough for me to care about your music or whatever, which people like sometimes won't say out loud, but sometimes they will too. Like sometimes they'll be really shitty about how you look, or they'll make, harassing statements or whatever. I have a friend who takes screenshots of all of the things that people will send her in her direct messages and stuff like that, and she'll like blast them. I love that she does that, because it's it definitely shuts those people down real fast. But it's also awful that that people do that. I know that a couple of us, whenever we protested last year at some of those venues that I mentioned earlier in this talk, we started getting a lot of unsolicited dick pics. And I can't help, like, all of the women involved, and I can't help but think, like, this is someone like trying to, like, this is retribution for us trying to stand up for this this situation and call out this the sexual harassers and the sexual assault and physical, all of that stuff. And I just blocked the person and stuff. I kind of wish that I had like, I reported and blocked and stuff, but I kind of wish that I had taken screenshots and, like, put it everywhere too, but that's not as much like what I do. Anyway, so those are just some more examples. It's really just the lack of safety and the lack of value put on us, and especially the value of our of how we look first, and then everything else is kind of secondary, rather than the other way around. Like, we're there to play a show, we're there to share our music, and then how we look, we can't, humans, we're attracted to aesthetic, like we can't completely like remove that, but like that shouldn't be the first thing that we have to deal with. And in a strange, almost another thing that I've experienced too, that I think a lot of female musicians also can relate to, is almost this weird like grooming culture too, of like just last week at a show, there was this significantly older man, which is fine, whatever, great. I love whenever there's people across all sorts of spectrums at our shows. But he came up to me and a couple of my bandmates. We were just kind of talking in a group, and he was like, "Anastasia, you are so talented. Like, you do all of these things," and like, really, really overly complimentary, to the point of like, okay, there's something here. And then he's like, and this was the kicker, this was the thing that I was just like, fuck you, dude. He was like, you're so talented, like your whole band's talented, but really you, Anastasia, like bring, like you put Then I Fly on the map. And it's like, okay, so you're gonna compliment me, and then you're gonna insult my bandmates in the same sentence and think that I'm not going to be upset about that. Like, it was very, very bizarre, but that's also something that happens too, is like, and some people are susceptible to that, especially if they're, really feeling very insecure about their music or about their performance or things like that. They might fall into like, oh my gosh, this person really, really likes me, rather than like, oh, there's something wrong here. Something's not quite right. And I don't know if there was a motive, but it was just a little too, and so the fact that we have to also kind of be thinking like, what are potential ulterior motives of people who are talking to us at shows, or or complimenting us or saying other things, is like we're constantly just having to evaluate our situation, our environment, for our safety, for like I find myself second guessing a lot of things just because of that same thing. Like, am I overreacting, or is there just something not right here? And like, I think we really always need to listen to our gut, even if we can't entirely explain why something doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, we should listen. And so I guess other ways that I digressed a little bit more there, but ways that fans can also help is like recognizing too that that's going to be something that's going to be part of that internal dialogue and that internal process of like, maybe that guy didn't have an ulterior motive. Maybe he just wasn't really great with his words. Maybe he wasn't really great with like explaining or sharing what he wanted to share, but like recognizing that there can be other ways that people, that band members, particularly marginalized band members, are perceiving these things because of the lack of safety as a whole. That, you know, it's not necessarily like I didn't say anything to that guy at that point in time and just, you know, let it go, just kind of walked away. But if I had, like, and if he had taken the time to also think about like, I'm a stranger, I am a strange man, I'm approaching a young woman, like, you know, there's a lot there that, you know, to unpack for someone who has, like myself, who's lived life as a woman in the music industry and has had to think about like, okay, is my drink drugged? Is like, do I like my bandmates are great about always keeping an eye on where I'm at. And but like the fact that has to happen too, or like, you know, I can't necessarily just like go outside and smoke a joint with a random person, in the same way that maybe a guy can, because who knows what might like come of that. Just safety in general. And so fans recognizing that there is vulnerability and a lack of safety in general, can be helpful. I know that's kind of a dismal like thing to say, but it's very real. It's very like, that's the reality of being a female musician, is our safety in this industry. And fans also just talk to us like humans too, like compliment our music, say something that you liked about our music. Like we work really hard at it, like you mentioned, you know, whenever you're like, you go to the gym or something, like you have to work up to these things. You don't just jump right in. And like that, there's hours and hours and blood, sweat, and tears that go into writing music and playing and performing and even learning other people's music. And so just honoring that the person that you just saw for 15, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, spent probably days of time preparing for that. And like allowing yourself to be humbled by that and grateful that someone shared and publicly emoted, really, and for you and with you. And like, yeah, just honoring that none of these things are easy for anybody. A lot of times whenever I perform, almost all the time, I actually wear shades because that helps with my performance anxiety. If I can't see people's eyes, that's the thing. If I can't see the whites of people's eyes, then I'm good. But if I do, like, I lose lyrics, I forget what key I'm in. Like it's a weird phenomenon, but like fortunately that works out because people think that it's just like this aesthetic cool thing. But I'm like, oh, there's really a lot more to it than that. But recognizing whenever you're talking to a musician that they probably do have a lot of those things that they're dealing with at that point in time. Every time I'm on stage, I love it. It's amazing. But also at the same time, I'm like, oh, okay, here we are. This is 50 minutes to show what I've worked on for months or whatever.
While you were talking about that stuff, like, because I'm just listening intently and just really trying to get an understanding of especially the problems that you've seen and also the suggestions that you made. While we were talking about some of those issues, like, I had a couple of things that were popping in the back of my head. And the first thing was, when it comes down to us as fans, one of the best things we can do is when it comes to, we want to create this family vibe for rock metal. We want to make sure it has this full-on family vibe every step of the way, and to make sure that everyone is welcome. And the best way to do is not to have those preconceived notions, but when you're talking to people, focus on the character of that person, not based off of what they look like, if they're man or woman, whatever, if they're a part of a marginalized community. Just look at them as people. Look at them as the person that they are, as the character that they have, because you're going to all of a sudden, you're going to look at people, you're going to talk to people, and you're going to come up and you're going to have these conversations with people, and you're going to end up creating, that family vibe because you're connecting with that person for who they are, not for what they look like on the outside or some other preconceived notion that you might have. When you're talking to a musician as well, it's based off, the character that they have, along with, they're playing music. This is their art. This is their passion. And if you connect with it, just connect with it. Connect with the music. Doesn't matter what, basically kind of just connect with it. Again, connect with the character on that and focus in on that. And then within the community, when you have those people that, are kind of just being the weird ones, the dicks, the assholes, all that kind of stuff, and just don't have that character that really represents for rock metal, like the people that after you were protesting were sending you dick pics. Yeah, call them out, because when you're bringing light to that character, now it's aware that this stuff is happening. Even though we know what's happening, now we have tangible evidence that this stuff is happening, and we can begin to fix the problem in the microcosm. Because when we fix the problem in the micro, it helps fix it in the macro. You take a look at the macro society, especially with women. The focus is primarily on the physicality, the looks, the attractiveness of all of it, and then everything else comes after it. But you think about it from a local, like a government standpoint. Where do all the changes really happen? At the local level, at the smaller level, and then they branch out from there. What can we do to best? Like, let's start out small with our own music communities. Then it grows to a larger music community. Then it goes to other communities within the arts. And all of a sudden it goes to other communities within culture. And next thing you know, it's culture as a whole. It starts out small and grows from there. But the one thing you said that absolutely, kind of blew my mind, but also makes total sense, was we were talking about, the whole entire thing. We brought up the weird guy that came up in the whole entire idea, like the grooming thing. Because in rock metal, we've seen that happen. We've seen plenty of members of bands, get canceled, kicked out, everything over allegations and over confirmation of that stuff that was happening. So understanding that when, you're at a show and you're talking to music and you're talking to anybody, talking to a musician, understand that they have, we've all gone through different things in life, but understand where the preconceived notions might come. Understand where their mindset might be when you're, when you're talking and doing certain things. You never know what they're related to, even though you could be saying something and could be coming across as completely genuine. But because of the way things have been over the past, God, I don't know how many years, or just use 30, 40. Is that a safe one to use? I would say.
Sure.
Yeah. So use like the past 30, 40 years. It's like, think about just where their mindset might be going with what you're saying or what you're doing. And all of a sudden, you can be able to work off that. You'll be able to connect with people a lot more. I'll even use this as an example. One thing I like to do at shows, especially with bands that I have had on the podcast before, as a thank you, is always like, I'm going to go see a show of yours, because I always like to go and do that. And I always make a promise of the first round is on me. Now, I'm never going to go up to some random band that's at a show and like, hey, I'll buy you a round or something, because you never know exactly where their thought process is, men or women. And when it comes to all of a sudden the bands I had in the podcast, like, I want to, give them a, thank you, but I've already established that connection there. So when it comes to the mindset around there, it's kind of weird if I went up to just some random band that I have no idea who they were and offered to buy them a drink. It kind of could come across as, well, I've never seen you before. What's kind of the motive there? Even though the motive could be completely genuine, you never know where the motive is actually going. all of a sudden, if I have that connection with someone and all of a sudden, offer, now it's like there still might be a little bit of that concern based off of what has happened over the course of, time, over the stories that we heard, over what the problems we're having in the industry itself. But for like at that point in time, I've already created those connections with these band members. So there's that more of that trust. Yeah, there's that trust there. It's understanding where people are coming from, the experience that they've had, and building up on that trust so that when we have that family vibe, that we are all together as a family, we're looking at each other as people, as the character that we have, and not based off some preconceived notion, and understand that people go through different things in life. So your actions, your words, while they might be genuine, might be perceived by somebody else as different. So how can we understand that and make sure that, like you said, like with that one guy, he might have been completely genuine, but the way that he went about it, it kind of set something off, in your brain, in your guts, like, this is kind of weird. Mm-hmm. Who knows if he was being completely genuine about it, but he could have gone about it, if he would understand that, he could have presented that in a much different way, and it could have come across the way that he wanted it to come across to you, and for you to understand that and see it as genuine instead of like, this is kind of weird. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Like, so from that, I mean, because I just always want to ask about this, like from what I kind of just put out there, was there anything that may have maybe missed on that one? Because even myself too, I know I'm human, I'm not perfect. So from your perspective, especially working so closely within this, was there something I might have missed in there, or something that maybe, from what you heard, maybe might be, could be misinterpreted, that maybe potentially could clear up a little bit more, just so that when it comes to delivering this message and really helping people understand how to help out not only the marginalized communities within the music industry, along with, everybody else that's in the music industry, to really create that whole entire family vibe and make sure that everyone feels welcome. I just want to, from your perspective, especially with how closely you work with this as well, I just want to know if there's anything I potentially missed, or, maybe was confused on, just to try and help out.
Yeah, no, I think you got it. And I really liked your reflection of like, it could be genuine or it could not. And the question mark is kind of like where the uncertainty is, because like in either situation, I think any person kind of knows how to deal with that. Like if they know 100% like somebody is not genuine, okay, we're like stepping away from that. Or like we know 100% they are genuine, like, yeah, maybe we'll lean into that. But then there's that gray area, and like that, and I think you presented that really nicely of like, it could be or it could not be. And so like, because of that, we have to like listen to our gut, or we have to kind of separate a little further from that. And the importance of people recognizing that is like, that could be something going on in our minds of like, what are the motives? What are, and safety, I guess just safety across the board, just thinking about like, someone might see us once at a show, but we're not just doing one show. We're doing tons and tons of shows. We have great shows. We have horrible shows. We have shows that like the sound is awesome and we can hear ourselves really well on stage. And there's shows where it's like, it's a wash. We don't even know how it sounds. And so like, we have all of these experiences going on in our mind, and that's just logistical stuff. Like that's not even the interpersonal people talking to us at the shows or after the shows, or interactions with venues, which can also be really positive or really negative or whatever. And so the fact that we're constantly like, there's this like Rolodex of like situations, and that we've been in, and all of the nuance in each of those shows or each of those situations too, that we're sifting through as we're at a gig, as we're in a new situation, a similar situation too. And the fact that we're human too. I really liked that you said like, just be like, basically just be open to receiving the person as they are. And like, and the character piece, I really love that. That, character is and values and things like that, lifting those things up about a person, because that's like really truly who they are, and not this like sack of bones or whatever that we live in this life. Like the character is the stuff that we really put time and effort and work on, or don't. And yeah, that was, I want to highlight that out of what you said. But I think, yeah, you got everything. You checked all the boxes. And I appreciate you like checking in and like wanting to share that with the community, because I think that is a hugely important uh, like fans and musicians both. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship, and so we can help each other out. You know, fans can help us as musicians, and then we'll, you know, put out more music, or we'll play more shows or whatever, if we feel safe, if we feel confident and happy. And fans will come to shows if they like us, you know. And then there's also relationships that are developed beyond that too. But yeah, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, because I know it's something where, especially from my perspective and from your perspective, we might be dealing with two completely different things based off of what we've experienced in life. So after I said, it's like, especially with, you know, you work within the music scene as a musician compared to me, who, you know, talks to musicians, podcasts, and always goes to shows, and I'm in the crowd. So it's a different perspective that I get to see, along with the different experiences that we've had going through life, just based on who we are as people, along with you, you know, as a music therapist, licensed counselor, along with being the women's committee leader on the Colorado Musicians Union board. So there's a lot there that's, I know, especially from my side of things, it's maybe if there's something I missed from your perspective, you know, I wanted to ask about that to bring that to light, just in case there was something that was there, just to clear any air that might be there. But again, it's kind of the main things is just, you know, understand that people go through different experiences in life. So when you are talking to them, or you're bringing up something, or you're connecting with them, understand that they might have a different idea of where you're coming from based off of just different things that have gone on in life, different things that they've experienced. So understand that, so that we can create more of that safety, more of that family vibe within the community. And also, you know, understanding it's about people's character. It's not about what they look like, and breaking down those preconceived notions, so that when you go and see a band, you're always giving them a fair shake, and you're always focused on who they are as people, and the music that they're playing, and the music that they're writing and performing, and not based off of just what they look like and just like what first meets the eye. It's breaking down that first impression and giving people the fair shake that they deserve, and just, you know, being open to the experience as well. Because if you're going to see a band and all of a sudden it's like, say, like for myself, I'll use me as the example. Say I'm going to see Rise Against, and all of a sudden it's like they've got 3 other bands on the bill. Being open and going to see all 3 of those other bands before Rise Against, even though I know I just want to go and see Rise Against, if I'm able to. Now, I know there are times where all of a sudden, you know, you might be running late, or the last time I saw Rise Against before we record this episode, I wasn't feeling very well, and the time it took me to get from Milwaukee to Chicago, then on the train down to the venue, I didn't get there until midway through the second band. So I was like, darn, I missed the first one. But, you know, it happens. But to put in the effort to try and be there for the whole entire show and giving every band a fair shake, that's just going to end up helping break down some of that performance anxiety, and help break down some of those ideals where, you know, oh, it's because it's just by looking at them, oh, they might not look like a band that I like. No, break that down, because hell, here's another example. First time I ever was brought up, Kevin, you should listen to Motionless in White. I looked at their picture and I'm like, is this some weird kind of like Marilyn Manson kind of thing? Because I'm not that big of a fan of Manson. But give the band a fair shake. See what happens. Listen to one song, I'm like, oh, this ain't bad. Listen to the second song, and I was hooked. That's what I mean by that. It's like, just give people a chance. Give the music a chance. And when it comes to music, don't listen to just one song, because an artist isn't based off of just one song. An artist has so many other songs, so many other sounds, so many other messages they want to put out there. So I always say on Spotify, it's like, you know that top 10? Pick 5. Because all 5 of those songs are going to be different, and you get an actual feel of what the band is. And you might find one that you're just like, how does this exist? This is amazing. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're off and running.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate that sentiment so much too, as someone who's open for, a lot of other musicians too. That's how musicians start, is as openers, you know, as like, that's how bands start. You don't you don't headline your first show more than usually, like there's rare cases where that does happen, but like usually, yeah, you're starting as the opener and then you're building up. You're building that fan base, you're building those other connections and stuff. And so like if nobody shows up for the first band, then that can be really harmful. Plus, you paid for this ticket that has all of this music. Why would you not like enjoy as much as you can? Like gas prices are shit and every inflation's through the roof. Like get what you can, And like I think about like Then I Fly. We're going on tour in April and May. We're playing for Ska by Ska West, and we're one of the earlier bands. We're playing at like 1:30 or something. And if people don't come to see any of the earlier bands and they just come to see Mephistopheles, which I love Mephistopheles, like I hope people do come for them, but they only come to see Mephistopheles. They've missed the whole festival. They've missed all of these other bands that have worked so hard. Like we're so stoked to be able to play this festival that we've never played before. And like people don't necessarily think about like the impact that has if like there's like 4 people in the audience whenever we're there. And yeah, again, why would you buy a ticket to something and not go to the whole thing? You don't like come halfway through a movie that you bought a ticket for. Like, so why would you waste money too, just logistically? And so it's hugely impactful for the other bands. And then you can decide, they're fine. Maybe it's not necessarily my cup of tea. And that's fine too. You're still a warm body in the audience, and that can still be helpful for the band, who could be scouted by somebody or something, like just seeing people in the audience, whether you are all about them or not, or you might just find your next favorite band too. And you said, you just don't know.
Yeah, there's sometimes you just don't know. So again, give every band the fair shake, and if you're gonna decide if you like them or not, do it based off of their music and based off of the character of the band. Don't do it based off of how they look, or maybe someone told you, oh, I just don't like them, or some negative comment on Twitter on the YouTube video or something. No, give it a shot for yourself, because your opinion is going to be different than theirs. So it just basically boils down to, again, just understanding where people we're understanding what people have come from. Yeah. Deploy compassion for that, deploy empathy for that, really focus in on character of people. So when it comes to, you're talking with people, you're figuring out who they actually are as people, and not just having some preconceived notion based off of other, like anything that they might not have had control in over their life, or just based off of some other preconceived notion that you might have had. And just give bands a fair shake, because you never know. You might end up you might have having something like this happen to you. You might go to a show just to see one specific band and one specific person perform, like I did one time. And they were one of the openers. And I thought, you know what? We'll just stay for the headliners because I paid for the ticket. Why not? The 2 bands that went on after the band that I wanted to see, and that band was Light the Torch that I wanted to see, because I wanted to see Howard Jones perform. The next band was Fit for a King. I'm going to see Fit for a King tonight as a headliner.
Nice.
The other band was Ice Nine Kills. And after that show, that band skyrocketed, become my second favorite band of all time, only behind Rise Against. And if it wasn't for me trying to get the most value for my ticket and enjoy the show as much as possible, that never would have happened. So when it comes to giving a fair shake to bands, there's a perfect example for you on why you do it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate you and appreciate this time.
Well, Anastasia, I'm not gonna lie. When I got on this one, I'm like, I'm not sure exactly where this conversation goes. Most of the time, I never know where this conversation goes. But I'm like, I can't see, what we come up with, what we talk about, but everything we talked about around, from what you do, along with everything you do with music therapy, talking about that, then your work with Colorado Musicians Union, everything around, the problems that you're seeing or the issues that are facing women and marginalized communities within the music industry. Talking about that, bringing them to light, and talking about how ways as not only as musicians, but also as us, the fans, how we can help to start to basically take care of some of these, fix some of these issues to the point where, as a microcosm music industry, we can create that family vibe with rock metal and everywhere around there. And then as that microcosm, it all starts out small and then it grows from there. We can start out small with us, and we can do what we can do ourselves. And if we focus on that, all of a sudden it's going to grow and grow and grow to the point where the whole entire culture can change. Not just around music, but the whole entire culture of this country can change just off of that.
Yeah. I love that. Especially being like part of a union, you know, that like unions are grassroots, like basically, you know, like we're you know, working for like workers' rights, workers' representation and stuff. And so that's exactly like the kind of foundation that we work from, the belief system, the philosophy that, yeah, the work that we do individually can, yeah, impact so many people.
Absolutely. Again, start out small and it can grow from there. But we start out the individual level, then we can really grow from there. Focus on what we can do as individuals, and then we can grow from there. So, Anastasia, as we bring this podcast to close, one thing I always like to do is give whoever my guest is, which in this case is you, a chance to say whatever you want to say, plug whatever you want to plug, promote whatever you want to promote at the end of this podcast. So, Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. Let's see. So just always have music in your life. I think like that's the thing. Like, not only is it something that can build that camaraderie, can build that community, whether you're a fan, a consumer of music, or you make music, whether as a hobby or you're making it a profession or whatever, keep it in your life. If nothing else, it's good for your brain. Even just listening to music, there's so many aspects of your brain that are engaged in that. And, you know, when your brain is healthier, you live longer, everything, you know, all of that stuff. So if you're not worried about anything except for how can I take care of myself? Like, keep music in your life. That is the way. And, that sounded very Mandalorian, but and I guess as for shameless plugs, so you know, I'm a professional musician. I'm also board certified music therapist, and my private practice is called Creative Remedies. I've got a website, creativeremediesllc.com. I do offer pay what you can services, because I also, my philosophy with that is I want what I offer to be accessible across, you know, all sorts of different financial situations. And got another music therapist who I'm about to hire, and other instructors and things. So we can, yeah, provide music therapy, adaptive lessons, traditional music lessons, and can help you keep music in your life in that way. Also, my projects are, so as a solo artist, my name is Anastasia Rose, AnastasiaRosemusic.com. I write poetry as well. And there's some of that stuff on there, and some of that turns into song lyrics, some of it just stays poetry. The projects otherwise that I'm involved with are Then I Fly. That's what I've been talking a lot about today. Occam's Rose, which is a duo, a lot of original music for that too. And then I'm in 2 cover bands. One is called Pretty in Punk, which is a all-female punk cover band, and then and then Appetite for Destruction, which is a Guns N' Roses cover band with some just really awesome musicians in the Denver music scene. And we actually I have a show with them tonight, and we're really fun. We dress up and do the whole like tribute cover band thing. Some people are not into that, and that's totally okay. But we have a lot of fun playing, and we have a lot of fun like engaging with our audience in that way, and getting to kind of play a different like character, if you will. So yeah, all of those things are out there. Then I Fly and Occam's Rose. You can look us up on social media. Actually, all of those bands. Pretty in Punk and Appetite for Destruction as well. You can look up on social media, and Occam's Rose has a website, occamsrose.com, and that's OCCAMSROSE.com, like Occam's razor. And then ifly.com. Actually, I'm going to send you the song that we recorded when we were locked down. Yes. Yeah. So it was loosely based on the Decline by NoFX. Sorry, it's sort of structurally at least. So it's a very long song. It's been likened to a rock opera, and yeah, it was a very fun project and stuff to do. So yeah, those are my shout outs.
There's a lot of shout outs there. Now it's time for me to end this podcast with 3 very specific things. One is I have to talk about all those shouts because there is so much there from all the projects that you're involved with, along with your solo stuff and with everything you do as a music therapist on top of, the Colorado Musicians Union. So there's so much there for people to find out, and not going to lie, I know everyone that was looking through it's like, if you want to find Anastasia and find any project that she's a part of online, you're probably not going to go back and listen to everything that was there. I'm not going to lie. So the economic brain in me, because that's what I studied in college, I know when sometimes, and I know that convenience is key. So instead of having to go back and look back and okay, what did you say? And have to type it in and everything. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to the description of this podcast. It's going to say find Anastasia online, and you're going to find links and labels for literally everything that's there. So it's going to be a one-click, one-stop shop type of thing from all of her projects, from the Colorado Musicians Union to also everything she does as a music therapist. So everything's going to be there for you to connect with her. So, if you're in need of some sort of help with music therapy, boom, right here. Got your help right there. This is the perfect place to go for. Want some cool music? Boom, perfect place right here. Everything is here for you. So it's going to be a description of the podcast, links, labels, everything. Make it as easy as possible for you. Now, the second thing is, and I alluded to it earlier, and it was the promise I always make where if I enjoy having guests on the podcast, which is every single time, and you have not broken that streak this time at all, and I said you've not broken the streak, my promise is always when I get to see artists perform for the first time that the first round is on me. I know you don't drink. I know we had talked about this stuff. So when I get to see you perform for the first time, we'll think of something else as the debt I have to pay as the promise. Sound good?
Thanks. Yeah, that'd be great.
I don't know what it is yet. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll think of something. And it'll either be, it'll be some sort of, it could possibly be any project that you're working on. I could probably just show up at some random point and be like, wait, who the heck is that? Who's going to be me there? Hey.
Yes. Yeah, that would be amazing. Plus, who doesn't want to come to Colorado and visit, right?
Exactly. Plus, I got family out there too, so I could go and say hi. They'd be like, "Hey, hi, how
Perfect.
are you?" Haven't seen you guys in a couple of years, but hey, hi, how are you? So out there. So Anastasia, bringing this podcast to a close, I cannot end this podcast in all good conscience by saying goodbye for a myriad of reasons. One being, I made a promise, and I always plan on keeping my promises. Second is, this was an absolutely incredible, insightful, amazing conversation any way you put it. And I do not want this to be the last time that we talk or have you on the podcast as well. I would love to have you back again in the future to talk about many more of these things. And hopefully the next time we talk about these things, it's more on the, we talk about this stuff. Now let's see how things have improved. And hopefully things have been improving over that time. And also because this was just too much fun, I don't want to not do this again. So is this goodbye? No, not goodbye. This is see you later.
Thanks.
Well, folks, that's my interview with Anastasia. Again, Anastasia Canfield is her name. Anastasia Rose is her stage name for all of her music stuff. And this was one of the coolest conversations we ever had. It was just something where I love the fact that we're able to talk about this stuff, that we're able to, really bring some of this stuff to light and then have a discussion around, okay, we see these issues that are happening. What's a way that we all can start fixing some of these issues for ourselves so that we can start on, what we're doing, and then how it can grow into really impacting not only the music industry as a whole, but also just our rock and metal community, create that family vibe. On top of that, make it so that, it's potentially be a whole cultural thing. It's a great way to look at it. And, it all starts out as the bottom and we got to work our way to the top, but we start out individually and make it work from there. So when it comes to finding Anastasia online, when it comes to any band that she's, any project that she's in, finding herself online as well. And also, if you are looking for anything when it comes to music therapy, make sure to, hit her up, and everything from what she does as a music therapist, her practice, all the bands that she works with, all the bands that she's a part of, all the projects she's a part of, everything you need when it comes to social media links, YouTube links, where you can stream the music, where you can buy music, download music, find the merch, along with where you can find her and her practice as a musical therapist. Yes, it is in the description of the podcast for you as well, so be sure to follow along with her. And if you need any help, please reach out to her, because after this conversation, you can easily tell she is more than willing to help out anyone in need. And who else would you want helping out than someone with this much passion behind her? I mean, come on, this is perfect. Also, if you're not subscribed to the Chord Progression Podcast, please do so by looking at the links here for the podcast: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. That's where you can connect with us, watch, all the social content we got, some of the crazy videos. But when it comes to the podcast specifically, YouTube is where we have all the videos for the podcast. You can watch the artists, and us connect with each other. You can also listen on Spotify, Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Amazon if you just want the audio version. All the links in the podcast in the description of the podcast. So please like, share, subscribe, everything in the Chord Progression Podcast. Tell your friends, tell your crazy neighbor down the street who likes music, because we all got one of those. So thank you very much for doing that. And if you're already subscribed to the podcast and like all our stuff on social media and follow, subscribe to that stuff, I want to give you a big thank you. Also, thank you to Phoenix Fitness and to Cause Use for sponsoring this podcast. Links and their promo codes in the description of the podcast below. So that's going to be it for me, guys. Thank you for watching this in the Chord Progression Podcast. My name is Kevin, and you guys know how I end every single one of them with a big, healthy, and hearty. See ya! Yeah!